So, I really just wanted to take the time to consolidate some of my thoughts about the current state of the Chinese market recently. And of course, I'll be walking you through some of my key arguments on why I still continue staying invested in the Chinese market, and more importantly, I have also been catching the knife. So before I start, just a quick plug. I do post a few snippets of my reflection of the Chinese market or my Alibaba investment. And for those of you who are avid users of LinkedIn, please feel free to connect with me. And in the second part of this video, I will also be going through some of my key thoughts and my key arguments in my recent LinkedIn posts to just expand a little bit on the few points that I made and why I still choose to remain invested. With that, let's get right into the video of why I'm still betting on Alibaba. So before we go into the details of understanding Alibaba and understanding Chinese equity market specifically, we know that as long-term Alibaba shareholders, for those of you who have been invested like more than 1 year ago, you know that looking at the price action of Alibaba, hey, it initially was at the highs of around $300, and then it started going down because of the NIPO news, because of Jack Ma's missing, because of the crackdown on e-commerce, because of the fine problem, because of the donation issue, and right now even more problems about Ant Group and Ant Financials. So if you were to really observe and keep a close eye on the entire price action, Alibaba plummeted from 300 to 250 to 200 to now hovering around the $150 to $160 range. And it doesn't take a genius to understand and to really internalize and appreciate demand supply of the stock market. The fundamental forces of the stock market is based off demand and supply. And as you can understand and as you can observe, given the deterioration of the share price in Alibaba, and we can understand that a huge amount of investors have been exiting their position. And as you can see on MarketBeat, just in Q2 of 2021, there's a total of $47 billion worth of equity in Alibaba Group sold, while only $7.64 billion bought. So as you can see in terms of demand supply, if demand and supply matches, then the share price will technically and theoretically not move. And in this case, because there's a lopsided amount of people or amount of investors throwing out their shares, it inevitably caused the entire share price or just the entire stock to just plummet and not recover, where Alibaba stock also show a huge sign of weakness. So because of this huge sellout of the company, many people then misunderstand and mistake it as, oh, China is currently uninvestable. All these hedge funds or huge money is flowing out of the entire stock. Does this mean that there's no other opportunity, and does this mean that the company, or specifically by and large the country, is uninvestable? Let's take a closer look and evaluate the entire veracity of this claim and this thesis put forth by many investors. So just to draw your attention to my LinkedIn profile, currently of course I do not have as many followers as Ray Dalio. I think he has around 2.1 million followers. But recently I just posted a very short consolidation of my thoughts on the current Chinese markets, which I thought was quite interesting, and I thought that we can spin it off into a video and just explain a little bit more and make it more pronounced in that way. So with that, of course, let's look into it. So my first point is, I think timing is really critical here. There are a few notable events that people are keeping their eyes peeled. So firstly, which is the 6 months promise on the intensified crackdown, which should theoretically last until the end of 2021. And the second point is the 20th Party Congress in 2022. So essentially speaking, it's more of like a noteworthy election of Chairman Xi to remain chairman for life. So some of you might ask, hey, Chairman Xi already abolished the entire system of governance. They do not have to restrict themselves to only 2 terms of office. And in name, he is already the chairman for life. But I would like to extend the conversation a little, because even though we might say that this entire party congress to re-elect him as chairman again is more of a ceremonial act, and all the different actors in this entire situation and in this entire election cycle still have to put their hands up and still vote for Chairman Xi to be the next party chairman. But why did I say that this re-election is noteworthy? I think this entire situation right now is that Chairman Xi is unofficially chairman for life, but he still has to go through the normal systems and go through the normal processes put in place to ensure that he remains re-elected. And before the 20th Party Congress actually come into fruition, and before he actually become re-elected, everything is up in the air. Nobody really knows whether somebody else in the party or lead an entire revolution against Chairman Xi. So who knows what is going to happen. But at least with these 2 events in mind, I think in the short term, the pain surrounding Chinese equities and the Chinese market, by and large, wouldn't see a very optimistic transition in the near term. But then I will still explain why I still remain invested rather than just exit my position and buy back in when the entire situation and when the entire outlook of the economy changes. Next, on point 2, the age-old argument of sitting on the sideline versus catching a falling knife. Nobody can time the market, so I gave up going into the endeavor. In the short term, as we can see in the prices of the stock, huge whales are exiting their position, especially huge funds. These drastic drops cannot be manipulated by retail investors. So this probably also suggests that many funds are underweight in the China sector. I believe a lot of them are just sitting on the fence, observing the situation. And since most of them are underweight, the entire basket of stocks seems to be severely mispriced. And of course, I would like to believe that the market is generally efficient. And one of the core arguments for why hedge funds are exiting the Chinese market is because of the different stakeholders that they have to answer to. And as you all know, most of these funds are American and US based because they have one of the most matured markets. They have one of the biggest fund out there and in terms of fund flow and in terms of ability to move markets. I think, which is also why, because of the animosity and because of the entire narrative playing out in the US environment right now, especially in US politics, there's been a huge amount of disregard and a huge amount of hatred against the Chinese economy and the Chinese political environment. Which is also why when you are investing in the Chinese economy and when you're investing in the Chinese market, some of the investors might be extremely uncomfortable and they might not want to have any forms of association with the Chinese market. So it's definitely the easy way out for all these different hedge funds to exit their position because to appease all these different investors and to appease all these different stakeholders. And more importantly, like I said, I would fundamentally believe that the entire Chinese market is extremely underweighted right now in a lot of all these funds portfolio. This also translates to an entire basket of goods or an entire basket of stocks to be severely mispriced and underpriced because of this lack of demand. And I would also like to acknowledge the point of view that, hey, all these hedge funds or all these big investors have hundreds and hundreds of analysts working for them. What makes you think you're much more special than them? And what makes you think that your decision is far superior than them? I think there are a few points that I would like to qualify. Of course, I'm not saying that, or of course, I'm not stating that I'm superior than hundreds of the analysts that they have in their teams, but I would just like to qualify that, hey, we are operating in extremely different environments. I have no one to answer to but myself, but they have a lot of stakeholders to answer to. And on top of that, I'm not in the pressure of trying to outperform the market in the next 6 months, in the next 1 year. I don't report my performance quarter on quarter, and I don't report my buy and sells quarter on quarter. So there really isn't anyone trying to supervise or anyone poking their nose into the affairs of how I do my investing. So this is the fundamental difference between hedge funds and big funds out there versus me as a retail investor. So I'm not in the pressure of trying to outperform the market in the next 6 months or 1 year or 2 years or so. I can really adopt a very long-term horizon, which in this case, I would believe that betting on China and betting on the e-commerce arm will yield a disproportionate amount of return. And that's of course just my own investment thesis and investment opinion. You don't have to share the same thoughts. Secondly, I would fundamentally believe that a lot of all this smart money only seeks the best opportunity out there. And once everything starts solidifying and everything starts coming down, the risk reward of all these different Chinese equities will inevitably drive all these different investors or hedge fund managers back. And this is just my own speculation. Next, on point number 3, in the short term, the pain probably wouldn't stop so quickly. For investors interested in participating in the China's market, I think it's quite a good time. For people uncomfortable, please just stay away from Chinese equities by and large. This is not the first time, and it will not be the last time that they do such adjustments to the market. In the long run, I fundamentally believe it's for more sustainable and quality growth. And I think I've been reiterating this point for quite some time now. And for those of you who have been following me, you're probably quite bored of me trying to nag this point home. And I think the main issue here is a lot of investors are uncomfortable with government intervention. They really just want to rely on how the market forces have been doing their thing and how they've been benefiting a lot of all these huge economies out there. But as far as I'm concerned, I think the entire intervention by the Chinese government has been of a sensible and very well thought out trajectory. They're not trying to disrupt entire industries and they're not trying to kill the different companies. What they're trying to do is really to achieve long-term sustainable and quality growth, which is also why my long-term bullish thesis of the entire Chinese economy remains intact, and a lot of all these different regulations and clampdowns put in place really don't affect my overall long-term outlook of the entire economy and stock market. Fourth, I think Karen Rudd's narrative was really insightful. Mao's era was on internal fighting amongst political leaders and also deemed as a revolutionary push. Deng's era was reform and opening China, which is also deemed as 改革开放. And now in Xi's era, he's really embracing independence and the strengthening of the middle class. But however, due to the media's role in sensationalizing this entire idea of common prosperity, if you really take some time to sit on it, isn't that supposed to be the goal of most governments around the world? Less the fact that how they attempt to demonize the entire idea of stealing from the rich and giving to the poor. So this entire stance and posture of the government right now of trying to embrace the idea of independence, which is also why you always see and you always hear from all these different high-ranking officials talking about dual circulation strategy, talking about ensuring self-reliance and having more independence and lesser reliance on all these different foreign economies. And more importantly, this idea of common prosperity, which is to help strengthen the entire middle class. So with this in mind, I think my entire investment thesis on Alibaba is of a more concentrated approach. And some of you might ask, hey, why are you not interested in investing in Tencent? I think when the entire middle class strengthen, and when more and more people are lifted out of poverty, more people feel liberated to spend even more money. And the e-commerce industry is essentially at the S-curve of all these different revolution and all these different innovations being brought about by the new narrative and rhetoric being pushed by the Chinese government. So which is also why I have never been even more excited about investing in Alibaba, and I've never been more excited in seeing how China as a country is able to benefit its population by and large. And the fifth point, in the long term, nobody really knows, right? The entire outlook of betting on China is really contingent on a few assumptions. First, is there really anything stopping the CCP from disrespecting market forces? Hard no. Can they close up their economy and market and essentially siphon money out of investors? Yes. Who is to provide that guarantee? But I'd just like to end off with the view from my own foreign minister, Dr. Vivian. China was humiliated in the last 2 centuries. Given their current understanding of their capacity and potential, why stop here? And with that, I'll see you in the next video, but more importantly, I'll see you on the moon. Goodbye!